everybody, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people just like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. As often happens with this show, one guest is referred by another guest, and Chef Sherrie Soria, who was on recently, who was my instructor at the culinary school I went to, recommended today's chef. Her name is Chef Sherrie, and she's going to be making something really interesting. I never even heard of it before. Apparently, it's an Indian steamed spicy lentil bread, and it's called Dhokla. And please welcome Chef Sherrie. Thanks so much for taking the time to make a recipe for us.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to share this recipe. And just a little bit about me. I have a degree in biology, and I started out as a scientist for many years working in the biotechnology industry. Went back to school, Living Light, and now I am a culinary plant-based chef and an instructor.
Nice.
I still like to experiment in the kitchen, though.
Nice. I've never heard of this recipe. Is it fairly common in India?
It is actually fairly common in India. And I like to travel around and experience different flavors, the flavors of the world, and try to incorporate the essence of those dishes into healthy vegan versions. And we can't always get these exotic ingredients. So I'm always looking at, how can I substitute but still have the essence of that dish? And so last year, I was able to travel to India. I was in southern India in Bangalore, and lucky enough to be hosted by a wonderful yogi and vegan chef. And she exposed me to 3 generations of vegan chefs, and they shared their personal recipes with me and their techniques. It was fantastic. It was my host's aunt who introduced me to her recipe of Dhokla. And Dhokla is made from lentils. It's a steamed bread, and it's very spicy. So this was really exciting for me, and I've been experimenting with steamed bread ever since.
Are you going to steam it in an Instant Pot by any chance?
Did you see that back here?
I did.
You can steam it on the stove if you have other steamers. The Instant Pot works great for this. And the link to the recipe will be below the video. I also have the recipe on my Facebook and Instagram feed at, if you can see that, Green Bean Cuisine. And it's funny, when my mom read this recipe, her first comment was, wow, there's a lot of ingredients. That sounds like a lot of work. And it is a long list of ingredients, but actually most of it's spices. And I thought this would be a fun recipe to introduce you to the common spices used in Indian cuisine. Most of these will probably be familiar, but there might be a few that aren't. We'll also talk about how to do some substitutions. This is a great recipe for that. And a little bit later, I can share some simple steamed bread recipes that can be really quick. I mean, it really is a simple recipe. It just looks complicated because I have so many spices. And today, my husband's helping me with the technology, and I set up another camera so we can have a close-up so you all can see the spices. So we'll try to switch over to that now.
By any chance, are you listening to it in the background? Because I'm hearing a little reverb.
I can't hear the reverb.
Okay, as long as the audience can hear.
Okay. And if there's a problem with that, maybe they can send messages through the chat and let me know. Okay, so the first thing I want to make is a chaat masala. And a chaat masala, it is a blend of dry spices. And this is the finished chaat masala here. And chaat is telling me that this is going to be a tangy spice mix. So my chaat masala includes coriander. Let's see, can you see that there? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the coriander seed, of course, grows from the coriander plant, which we also know as cilantro. Coriander is a warm and mellow, slightly sweet spice. It's a digestive aid. And it also helps to lower blood sugar and blood pressure. This is actually being studied quite a bit now for diabetics. I also have some black pepper, and maybe you can see there's some white color in there. What I found really interesting, and I didn't know this, but black pepper is actually the entire fruit that is dried down. And so the black part on the outside is the fruit, and it's still white on the inside. So when you have white pepper, it's just the seed. The black pepper is the fruit and the seed dried down. And black pepper tends to be more pungent, a stronger flavor. I have some cumin seed. Cumin is one of the most popular spices in the world. And you can probably think of other cuisines that uses a lot of cumin, like Mexican food. Cumin is also a digestive aid. And then my fourth ingredient, this is mango powder, dried unripe mango. This is what gives the chaat masala the tangy taste. And we can find mango powder here in the States. You can make your own if you have a dehydrator, just by drying down your sliced mango and then grind it up in a grinder, or if you have a blender. Sometimes, and you'll see a little bit later, I'll use fresh mango. Chaat masala also often has 3 other ingredients that I am not going to include in my chaat masala. So the first one I'll show you, this is, and it's a powder, it's called asafoetida. It's sometimes also known as hing. And this is a pretty unique spice. It's extracted from the root or the rhizome of a plant. When it's raw like this, it has a really strong, not very pleasant aroma. But when you cook it down, it's much more mellow. And it even has like a subtle garlic and onion flavor. Asafoetida was added to any dish we made that contained lentils because it helps with gas, with the bloating, and you only need a pinch. I also have some dried chili powder. This is red chili powder. And the last ingredient, it's called black salt. Of course, it doesn't look black, I know. And what this really is Himalayan pink salt that has been cooked down with other spices and herbs and a hadad fruit. And a hadad fruit has a sulfur compound. And what this black salt is often used for in vegan cooking is to mimic that aroma and that flavor of egg. This is another one of those spices that's quite pungent when it's raw, and so it really should be cooked. And so the last 3 ingredients, the asafoetida, the red chili, and the black salt, I do not include in my mix because I want to have more control of them. So for example, the asafoetida and the black salt, those should be cooked. A lot of times I'm using my spice mixes on raw foods. Also, I want to have control of the salt. I have lots of clients that do not want added salt. I often do not want added salt, so I want to have that control. Same thing with the chili powder. Everybody has a different taste for heat. Some like it, very spicy, and others want it very mild. And so by keeping it out of my mix, I have more control. So that's my chaat masala. And we will go back to our wide camera, and I'll move this out of the way for now.
Sherrie, I recently hosted a summit based on GI health, and a couple of the chefs did cooking demos, actually one of the doctors too, for low FODMAP. And the thing that's nice about that however you pronounce it in hing, is that people that can't have onion and garlic, they can have that.
Exactly. And there's a lot of different reasons and different groups that prefer not to have garlic and onion in their recipes. And it stimulates our digestive system, and we don't always want that, but we like the taste. So it's good to have those options.
Yeah, mango powder. It sounds great. Would you get it like in an Indian spice store? Because that sounds like it would be great in many
I
things.
did have to order it online, and sometimes it's called amchur, AMCHUR, which is the Hindi name for mango powder. And a great way to add a little tang.
Sounds great.
Now with my spices, I prefer to buy my spices as whole seed spices. They have a much longer shelf life. And there are several ways to prepare spices. So with Indian cuisine, it's very common to temper your spices. And what that means is to fry it in a little bit of oil or ghee. So that would be common with Indian food. And what this does is release the volatile and non-volatile oils, and it really intensifies the aroma and flavor. You can also dry roast your spices, and this will intensify the aromas and flavors. I do like to dry roast, and it's literally just in a dry pan. Roll the seeds around in there until, and it's on a low heat, until you have just a hint of the aroma, and then remove it. So when you're dry roasting, you want to be careful not to burn your spices, because if you burn your spices, they're very bitter and it changes the whole flavor. So ways to avoid burning it: low heat, keep your seeds moving, and the moment you smell it, remove it from the heat and pour it in another bowl. And then I grind it down. And of course, you can use all your spices raw. And I do like to, like I said, get them in whole seed form and grind them down myself. And then I get all that aroma as I'm preparing my dishes. So we have more ingredients for our dhokla. So let me show you. I'll move these over a little bit here, and we'll go back to our close-up so you can see the rest of the ingredients. Here it comes for me. It's a little bit slower on mine. Okay. So I have, let me see that, fenugreek. And these are fenugreek seeds. And you can see some of them are light, kind of a light yellow, and some are a little bit darker. The darker ones I dry roasted. Fenugreek is one of my new favorite spices because it has a little hint of a maple flavor. And I love maple syrup, but I don't always want all that sugar. So this is a nice way to add in a little bit of that maple flavor. Another interesting thing about fenugreek is that there's a lot of studies going on with it, using it with weight loss, because it has a property to increase satiety and fullness. And so then we eat a little bit less. I have some, this is black mustard seed. And black mustard seed is the most common in Indian cuisine. Also available is brown mustard seed and yellow mustard seed. And I just learned that yellow mustard seed naturally is not yellow at all. It's kind of a light tan, and it's dyed yellow with turmeric. And that is my next ingredient, turmeric, which is often in many types of curry. It's an anti-inflammatory. And most of these spices are actually digestive aids as well. I have some dried curry leaf. With Indian cuisine, they almost always use fresh curry leaf, and it was delicious. I can't find it here, so I'm using dry curry leaf. And I have a little bit more of the cumin seeds. Yes, more cumin. I know it's in the chaat masala as well, but I really wanted that cumin flavor to come through. That was probably one of the most used and the strongest flavor I tasted while in India. In fact, I felt like cumin was coming out my pores. Now this one, let me see if I can hold it up here. This is a mix. So I have some lemon juice. I have chopped ginger, and this is fresh ginger, and a little bit of peanut butter. So this is another one of those examples of substitution. Peanut oil is very common in Indian cuisine, and I like the taste of it, but I wanted to avoid having that processed oil. And so adding a little bit of peanut butter, I still get that flavor, but it's more of a whole food. I sometimes might even get fresh peanuts and maybe a little bit crumble and sprinkle it on top of the bread to get that flavor. In India cuisine, they use jaggery quite often as their sweetener. And jaggery is sort of a dried molasses. It may have date sugar or palm sugar in it. So I found this is date sugar, but it's not just sugar. It's the entire date dried down with all the fiber in it. So I liked that that was a better choice because I want the whole food and especially the fiber. But today, instead of adding date sugar, I am going to add some fresh mango. And so that'll give me my sweetness. I'm also using this mango instead of yogurt. Yogurt is very common in Indian food. It gives it not only that tangy flavor, but it adds moisture to the bread. And so the mango will add moisture. Then, of course, our green chili. And everything was so spicy. Green chilies were very common. I wanted some heat with this recipe, so I am using the serrano pepper to give me some heat. And then the base of the bread is lentils. And today, so I have, this is my lentil. This is chana dal. And chana dal is actually a chickpea. And I was trying to figure out, okay, I have chickpeas, or also known as garbanzo beans. I eat those a lot. Like, this doesn't look like my garbanzo beans. What's going on? Or maybe it's the inside of it. There's a whole variety of chickpeas. And so this is one variety. Probably many of you are familiar with the white garbanzo bean. It's the same family. And I have used many different types of lentils. So it's very forgiving and interchangeable. I've used urad dal, moong dal, red lentils, split peas. How about black-eyed peas? Any of them work. And then I have some rice. And this is a sona masora rice, which is an Indian medium grain rice. I'll go this way. And again, you can interchange your rice. I've used basmati rice. You can use any rice. You can leave the rice out if you like. It's not necessary to have the rice in there. The rice does give the bread a little bit of softness. And so Ron's going to switch us back over. Okay. So that's a lot of ingredients, right?
Yeah.
The bread, really, if I just wanted to make a simple steamed bread, I really only need lentils. All the other stuff is bonus. So to start the bread, I would start with my dal and my rice. I soak them, and I soak them separately, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. Soaking them 5 to 6 hours. You'll probably read in a lot of places that you don't need to soak lentils, but I always soak them. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, your earlier show, Joyce and Mercy. We're talking about removing the ligands, which can be kind of challenging on our digestive system. And so soaking removes those for us. So I soak my dal and my lentils and my rice. Once they're soaked, drain them off, give them a good rinse. And I blend first the lentils with the water and blend it smooth. And at that point, if you are one that likes to add a little salt, you could do it there. Sometimes if I'm adding the peanut butter, I add it at this point so it gets blended in nice and even. Once I have my lentils and water blended smooth, then I add my rice. And I only pulse it really quick because I want to leave some of that texture. That is really apparent in traditional Dhokla, is there's this texture to it. Okay, let's see. I'm going to move those to the side. Once I have blended that together, I'll put it in a cake dish, a bread dish. I like to use glass. And I want it to ferment. I'm going to bring this over here. Is that something you can see that? It's just it's kind of a thick batter. And I let this ferment. It's a natural fermentation. I am not adding any probiotics or starters. And this fermentation serves a couple of reasons, but the main thing is it's going to be easier on my digestive system. It starts to break it down and it's easy to digest. And as it ferments, depends on the temperature where you're fermenting, but I never let it go more than 24 hours. It's not necessary. Usually anywhere from 6 to 12 hours, depending on the temperature. And you'll know because you'll see little bubbles forming and the aroma will be maybe slightly sour. So this one has been fermented. So now I have to add in all my ingredients to my bread. So let's get these all ready here. So get my mortar and pestle. I'm going to add into my mortar and pestle my fenugreek. I want to grind these. My mustard seeds. And let's see what else needs to be ground. Cumin seeds. I'm not going to use the date sugar, so let's move that out of the way. And I think that's all that needs to be ground, so I'll go ahead and take care of that. If you have a coffee grinder, if you have mortar and pestle, I love mortar and pestles. And as I grind this, I'm getting the aroma. I wish we had smell-o-vision.
Sherrie, Sharon wants to know, when soaking beans overnight, should they be refrigerated?
It depends on the temperature in your house, but as long as I tend to put like a towel over it so there's not other things falling into it, I ferment at room temperature. I mean, I soak at room temperature.
Great. And Monica says, soaking lentils for 5 to 6 hours will likely start the sprouting process. Is this part of the technique?
Yes, absolutely. And that's an excellent question. Most things, when we sprout them, not only are they easier to digest, but they're more nutritious. We can absorb more of those nutrients. So I sprout everything. Beans. I have some sunflowers sprouting behind me. And a lot of our spices we can actually sprout as well. Sometimes, like the fenugreek, I'll soak it with my dal and it kind of sprouts and softens, and the aroma carries through the entire dish. Okay, have that ground. So I'm going to just, and you don't have to do everything in the same dish, but I don't want extra dishes to wash, so I'm just doing it all in the same dish. So there's my ground spices. I have my little pinch of asafoetida to help with our bloating. And let's see, I'm going to add some chaat masala that is already blended together here. And remember, I don't have the red chili powder in my chaat masala, so I can add quite a bit. And I always like to make extra when I'm making spice blends because I will use this in the weeks to come. Okay, we're skipping the date sugar on this recipe and I'm adding some mango instead. And you don't have to add any sweetener to the bread. With the fermentation, there's actually a little sweetness already in there. Okay, I have my turmeric powder. I have some curry leaves, my ginger, peanut butter, and lemon juice. A little spatula here. And I'm only going to add a little bit of the chopped green chili because I want to put it on top. It makes the bread look really pretty. So I'll save that one. Save this one. I got my Chaat Masala. Okay, I think I got all of those in there. Give this a stir. I just want to make sure all the ingredients go throughout the entire bread. And there you can kind of see what's going on. The last ingredient that I may add or not, it's an optional ingredient, is the baking soda. And so what the baking soda will do is it will bubble up, form little bubbles, and those little air gaps that we're used to seeing in bread, it enhances that texture and it makes it fluffy. You do not have to add it with the lentils. I find the bread is already quite fluffy. And so the difference between adding baking soda or not is fairly subtle. If you do add baking soda, make sure your steamer is hot and ready to go. So when those bubbles start forming, we get it into the steamer and it holds those little air gaps. The other thing that you want to be sure with if adding baking soda is to mix it throughout or you'll have an inconsistent bread. So I'm going to get that all in there. Okay. Save these two. I'm going to just move this out of the way. So I have two steamers going today. I have my Instapot and the traditional just on the stovetop. I'd let that steam for about 25 minutes. You can use a toothpick to check it, make sure the middle is done. And so before I pull out the finished bread, let's make a little mint chutney. So mint chutney, it's a sauce. So I have some yogurt, and this is a cashew-based yogurt. And if you remember earlier, I said most Indian dishes, they use a lot of yogurt. And with Dhokla, the yogurt would be added into the bread and it would make it moist and tangy. Yogurt also contains probiotic. If I put it in the bread and cook it, I've killed all those microorganisms, my probiotics. So I'm choosing to make a yogurt sauce that will be raw and I get the benefit of the probiotics. So just transfer some of this yogurt in here. And I have some fresh mint I just cut from the garden just a few minutes ago. Growing your own herbs is a great way to cook and it adds so much to your dish. I have some lime juice. A little bit of garlic. Today I'm using a powdered garlic which will be a little bit sweeter and less pungent, but you can use fresh garlic. I like to use raw garlic. You can use roasted garlic if raw garlic is a little bit too much for you. And some fresh cut scallions. That easy. And so I'm just going to stir that up. So my mint chutney is complete. Okay, are we ready to see what the finished bread looks like?
You bet.
Okay. So you may use a non-stick pan. I'm not a big fan of non-stick and I like to use glass. So I might grease this dish with a little coconut oil, or if you want to avoid all oil, I'll use some parchment paper. So hopefully this comes out clean.
The big reveal.
The big reveal. Let's see if I can shake it out there. Come on. And so you can see I did use some parchment paper. And then of course I want to flip it back up. I want to see the pretty side.
Wow, that's cool.
And very bread-like, spongy. And usually I would garnish this with maybe some dried coconut. And this is common in India to add coconut. And usually a fresh herb. I'm using cilantro, or as they would say in India, coriander, same plant. My towel.
But when you buy coriander in a jar, it's different than when you buy fresh cilantro, the plant.
Correct. And I think the fresh plant is much more aromatic. And I like to use the two together to give this well-rounded flavor. So let's take a look at the inside of this. And yeah, I just realized on that last bread, I'll still add these, but adding a little red pepper and chilies on top not only adds more heat, but it's beautiful. And when I was served this, you might have the mint chutney on the side with the bread, or I might just put it right on top. Maybe a little bit more cilantro. And we have, and I'm going to squish it. I won't handle your food. I'll handle my food, but it's bread, and it's moist, and it's a much healthier version than baking. Anytime we can have the option to cook with moisture versus dry cooking, the wet moisture, the wet cooking is always healthier. So the baking, grilling, broiling versus a steam, the steam will always be a healthier version and maintain more nutrients. And so this is our Dhokla. Now you can imagine with a steamed bread like this, all we need is the base, and we can add our own favorite ingredients. And so for a simple steamed bread, for example, that first one I made where I showed you just the batter, I'm making another one that will just have garlic, rosemary, maybe a hint of sage, and maybe some pumpkin seeds or sunflower seeds on top to give it some texture. So that would be a really simple version. I've also made a apple cinnamon bread this way with a little bit of date chunks in there. It's almost like a caramel apple. Or how about a jalapeno cornbread served with fresh salsa? So you can see the options here are endless. Wherever your imagination can take you, that's the bread you can make.
That sounds like so fun, especially for people that have to avoid, you know, gluten and bread, and it's so much healthier because it's made from a whole food instead of a flour. Gina says, did you put the dish on the bottom or did you use a trivet when steaming?
So in here, I put it on the little Instapot shelf. If I'm doing it on the stove, I'll pull this one back out so you can see it. So the water is in the bottom part, and I just put it directly in the steamer. And while I have this one, I'm going to add some chilies to that.
And Monica wants to know, can you use the Instant Pot as a steam oven? And how long in the Instant Pot, asks Mandy.
So I do often steam this bread in the Instapot, and there is a steam setting on there. And I keep the valve open so it's actually steaming. And so it's still about 25 minutes, just as if you would do it on the stove. So it's not acting as a pressure cooker, it's acting as a steamer.
That's neat. I've heard of this, but I've never really realized how easy it was.
And it really is easy. And so it's changed my life about bread. I'd kind of cut out all bread from my diet for several reasons. And this opened up so many possibilities. And for those people who not too sure about lentils, and I've met some people who they've had gone to Ayurvedic practitioners who've said, maybe you shouldn't have so many lentils. You can make this bread with buckwheat groats as well. And it's really good. It's fluffy.
Well, that sounds really good. Buckwheat. Yeah. That's really neat. Thanks. You should write a bread book or a steamed bread book.
Well, I am actually working on a few books. And so the steamed breads are definitely going to be included in these books.
That was a lot of fun. You guys have any more questions for Sherrie? As somebody is saying, Shasta is saying steamed breads are very Asian. I guess maybe Asians make steamed bread. I didn't realize that.
Yes. And, when we start thinking about it, how about a tamale? I mean, that's a steamed bread.
True. Yep. Except they, each culture and each country maybe uses a different whole grain to start with.
Exactly. And who knew that lentils could be so fluffy? I didn't.
Yeah, that's really neat. Joan says, what's the name of your Facebook page?
Green Bean Cuisine. Let's see here.
It's in the show notes, but Joan's watching on Facebook, so she can't see the show notes. So that's probably why.
So the bean, it's like a human bean. I'm trying to be a green bean. Green Bean Cuisine.
That's clever. That's clever. How long have you been plant-based?
Let's see. Between 13 and 14 years. I've faced a health crisis. And I'm one of those people that if I put my mind to something, I'm all in. I don't like to do things gradually. So I was all in and, threw away everything in my kitchen, all the food, all my toiletries, everything, and started clean. And boy, it has made a huge difference.
That's great. Olga says, if you're using buckwheats, what is the ratio of buckwheat to water?
So with the buckwheats, it'll be about the same ratio if you're soaking and sprouting your buckwheats. So in the recipe, I think I had 1 cup to about 1 1/4 cup. But you can always look at the consistency of your batter because not all pseudo grains, lentils are made the same, and some absorb more water than others. And so you want that batter to be thick, but you want it to be kind of, how would I describe that? You could easily pour it off. And if you add too much liquid, that's okay. It still works out fine because in the steamer, the excess water steams off.
Do you eat a combination of raw food and cooked food?
I do. So I'm trained in preparing raw foods, and it was very enlightening to learn all the benefits of raw foods. I also prepare gently cooked foods. Usually that means steaming. And in the wintertime when it's cold, I like a hot soup. And so that's usually when I cook. And of course, beans, lentils, potatoes, things like in my mushrooms. I always cook mushrooms. I know that there are some mushrooms technically that you can eat raw. When I cook them, they just digest so much better.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Furman said you've got to cook mushrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a tough fiber in them that can be really hard on our digestive system.
What does a typical day of eating look like for you?
My husband and I usually have a giant salad every day. And when I say giant, when I have guests over and I pull this salad bowl out, they think it's the salad to be shared with everyone, but that's an individual salad. So that's one of my favorites. We have soup almost every day. So those two are constant, and I cook for other people. So like this week, I'm making a lasagna, and I'll give you a little hint about the lasagna. One of the tips that have really changed this recipe to make it rich is I add artichoke hearts in the sauce. Yum. I always have a salad on my menu. It's always a soup, a salad, and a couple of vegetable dishes. And I have one client who has a sweet tooth, so I do make desserts, but I'm always looking to make the healthiest dessert to help her kind of transition.
Right. Like maybe sweetened with dates or sweetened with fruit as opposed to sugar.
Yes, I'm always using fruit. I prefer fresh fruit. I think that's the healthiest. Sometimes I use dried fruit, but we have to be careful with dried fruit because the sugar concentration is so much higher.
Yep. Olga asks, have you ever made a lentil flatbread?
I have made a lentil flatbread. One of my favorites as far as the taste is a dosa. A dosa is a fried flatbread. And so I don't make that very often because I don't like to fry, but it's so good. And you could actually do it with this batter, but add more rice than lentils. And then of course use a much bigger pan, so the dough's not so thick. The rice doesn't rise as much as the lentils.
Nice. What's your favorite thing to eat and what's your favorite thing to make?
Oh gosh, I like trying out new recipes and I like to explore the flavors from other countries. I recently tried a Jamaican jerk type spice with eggplant. And it turned out so good. It had so much cinnamon in it. I thought, well, wow, this is going to feel like a dessert, but it wasn't. It didn't feel like a dessert at all. And so that was a lot of fun.
Do you ever use vinegars in your cooking or uncooking?
I do use vinegars. I'm very sensitive to it because there are other people who prefer no vinegar. And so I might add a citrus juice. But there are times when I like a little drizzle of balsamic, but usually I'm using apple cider vinegar.
Nice. Yeah, because you get to pick two of your favorite flavors of my favorite balsamic just for being on the show. But I always ask because some people just don't eat vinegar for some reason.
And some people are sensitive to the vinegars. I have read that vinegar can slow down the digestion. It can be very subtle. It's a very individual thing. And sometimes I want to slow down the digestion so I can increase my absorption.
I know that Dr. Greger recommends it in his book. Like, I think it's 2 tablespoons a day is what he recommends, or 2 teaspoons at every meal, something like that.
Oh, does it? It was funny. I had my sister-in-law visiting a while back, and she likes to have a little bit of vinegar to stimulate her digestion. And she asked me for some, and I gave her apple cider vinegar, and she said, wow, this is the best vinegar I've ever had.
Wow, that's cool. Joan says, what can I sub for the yogurt in this recipe? Plain is only available in a huge container at my store.
I ran into that too, where the cashew yogurt is this giant thing. And so then I had to start thinking of other recipes. The yogurt, so if we think about what the ingredient is adding, so the yogurt is adding tang and it's adding moisture. So in this case, I added lemon juice for that tanginess and mango. You could add coconut. You could add a nut butter. I used a little bit of peanut butter, but how about a tahini? So the yogurt is adding moisture and a little bit of tang.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for showing this. This is really a fun technique. I wish, I've never seen classes in this technique, or really even, I think I heard about it once. Jessica Porter came on the show and did something steamed, but I didn't realize it was like a thing.
Yeah, this was one of the most exciting recipes that, when I was traveling in India and as I'm eating this really delicious, spicy steamed bread, I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot of things I can do with this.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Sherrie. It was nice to meet you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. We're doing lots of cooking demos in December because it's holiday time and we want you guys to have many recipes. So if you come back tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we have Shada Soleimani from Healthy Cooking with Shada. She's going to be making several recipes that helped her lose 120 pounds. Thanks again, Sherrie, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.